Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is December 1st. It's Monday. Look, I've already decorated my set. I am joined right now by Bill Reel, and Radio Free Mormon has been kind of in transit, traveling back from Thanksgiving. And so he's going to pop in, I'm sure, very dramatically at some point during the newscast. How are you, Bill? Did you survive Thanksgiving?
I did. We ended up doing Thai food for Thanksgiving. I posted pictures like all of us goofballs do anymore on the modern age. We take pictures of our food and tell everyone how exciting our meals are. So I had a Thai Thanksgiving. It was great. Spent a lot of time with Teresa. Had Thanksgiving with my kids and grandkids yesterday. And here I am for the newscast.
That's right. Here we are. We're like mailmen, right? Rain, snow, sleet, Thanksgiving. We are here. And as I said, RFM will be joining us as soon as he can get all his ducks in a row and just pop in. So let's just start our slides really quick here. We have a lot of stories to cover. A lot of things happened over the week before Thanksgiving and over the weekend. We're going to talk about allegations of how the LDS Church protected Wade Christofferson, brother of First Presidency member D. Todd Christofferson. Bill will be diving into that first up. That's our main story. Another Utah sex abuse case in Provo. Bill will also just kind of piggyback on that one after his first story. Salt Lake Tribune highlights faithful podcasters. That will be a Radio Free Mormon story, and we'll kind of pop over to that when he is able to join us. The Pope condemns polygamy and polyamory. That's my story. That's kind of interesting. The U.S. is dropping religion like a hot potato. Also my story. Deseret Books' modest clothing store is closing up shop. I think we all saw this coming, and we're going to talk about that for a second. And also, are AI girlfriends on the rise among young adult LDS men? That'll be fascinating. So we have a couple little announcements before Bill's first story. Let's go to our first. There we go. Did you know that it's our birthday coming up on the 3rd?
I didn't know this, but this is super exciting. Look at this. Happy second birthday.
I can't believe it. It seems like it's just gone like that. I mean, honestly, when I was scrolling back through all the episodes, trying to figure out what number are we on. I mean, we miss sometimes if it's a holiday like Memorial Day, we give everybody a break or things like that. But we are pretty dang consistent. We rarely miss. So I'm proud of us. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think we're doing a great thing here. It's been really fun 2 years ago to have created this newscast and to see it be a mainstay now 2 years later. Happy birthday to you, the Mormon Newscast.
That's right. And speaking of fun and exciting events around the Mormon Newscast, Bill, why don't you dive into this? We had some breaking news on our cruise right before we came on. So this is super exciting.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be breaking news to announce that Dr. Julie Hanks has joined us, but we actually are announcing just in the last few hours that Jana Spangler is joining us as well. So We've got Radio Free Mormon, Rebecca, myself, Landon Brophy, Ganesh Cherian, Dr. Julie Hanks, Jana Spangler, Randy Bell, Sam Young, and some rando, I guess, is going to be joining us too. So
who is that?
I'll just note, we originally reserved 50 cabins to put this group together. And we were like, oh, maybe we'll get 25. Maybe we'll get lucky. And here we are 2 weeks after announcing this. All 50 cabins are now sold. And our travel agent, Kathleen, has reached out to Carnival. Carnival has said, you are welcome to keep booking one by one additional cabins. And we will notify you when that's no longer possible. But as of right now, you can still get a cabin on the cruise. We've also been told that the balcony cabins are selling extremely fast, and there may be a shortage on those in the near future. So it's not that you wouldn't be able to get a cabin if you did something in, say, a week or two, but you may not be able to get access to a balcony cabin. And then if a little bit more time passes, at some point, the cruise will have sold enough of that cruise, those cabins for that cruise, that we will not have access to them anymore. So at this point, there are no more promises. We are technically sold out, but Carnival is extending additional cabins to us. And there's that. And then there's the 2 links there on the page, and I will put those in the live chat as well as the show notes also, so that folks can get information and get their quote for the cruise.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, you were ambitious when you said, let's do 50. You were the one that said it. I'm like, oh, let's try, first year doing this. And you're like, no, 50. Here we are 2 weeks later. And so if I understand what you're saying, We had those 50 reserved. Those are gone. Now anybody that books, they're booking alongside, any other person that might also be trying to get one, a cabin. And so when those sell out, those are gone. But one of the really fun parts about this, I think, is that we've already started a Facebook page. Bill set this up where once you're booked, you're on the Facebook page and we're all already talking and getting to know each other. Somebody started a countdown clock. We have, how many hundreds of days to work out and get in shape for that cruise, but it's going to be really fun. So please join us. There you can click on those links. You can talk to our wonderful travel advisor, Kathleen, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So please come and party with us. It's going to be really fun.
It is going to be a blast.
All right, let's dive in to our stories, and Bill is going to take us through this week 2 of Wade Christofferson. I can't believe it's only been a week since this came out, but more information. Floodlit, we should say right away, if you have not donated to Floodlit, I think they and the Widow's Mite, we podcast, we synthesize things, we talk about data, they're gathering it. They're doing it, and they are extremely important. So please find out more about Floodlight. And if you can help them in any way, please do.
There are no ifs and buts. Floodlit is doing the Lord's work. So I want to start off with a little forward, just to sort of set the tone for this. RFM covered the story as it had just come out last week. But in the last week, additional details have come out. And I will be repeating a little bit of what RFM shared, only so that the things I add to it will be in context. I want to note that this story is based on accounts provided by multiple independent witnesses, and it's Floodlit that's sharing those, and those descriptions closely align with one another. But while we're careful to recognize that formal confirmation is still pending, in other words, these are allegations, these are pending charges, this case has not reached its conclusion. And so because of that, the consistency, the number of sources, the specificity of the information make it a matter of legitimate public interest for sure. Our coverage reflects what these witnesses have reported, even as the investigative process continues. Tonight, we're going to walk through what's come out since our first report on Wade Christofferson. Again, that was done by Radio Free Mormon last week, so check out last week's episode if you think you've missed something in my telling here and adding additional details. Because the new details paint an even bigger and honestly an even more disturbing picture of how the LDS Church handled him, meaning Wade Christofferson, over nearly 4 decades. And what stands out here isn't just one man's alleged abuse, it's the infrastructure, the culture, and the decisions that allegedly made it possible for him to have access to kids again and again. And remember, this isn't coming from critics. These details come from victims, relatives, church records that Floodlit was able to obtain. So when we talk about the system, we're talking about what the records show based on what witnesses are reporting to Floodlit, what church records show about Wade and his church membership, and what the chronology is of the dates as they've occurred, as they've been reported to us. These are allegations, but it's not allegations from a single person. These are allegations from, again, multiple witnesses. So I want to start with the earliest accusations. The timeline shows that Wade allegedly began abusing children as far back as 1985, almost immediately after moving to Crystal Lake, Illinois. And it wasn't one victim. We're talking 9 to 12 alleged victims across Illinois, Ohio, and Utah, stretching from the mid-1980s all the way into the 2020s. Now, here's where the institutional part kicks in. According to victims, bishops in the early 90s knew about what had happened. A girl reports him during a temple recommend interview. A father reports that Wade tried to assault his daughter during a sleepover. Other girls tell bishops about waking up with Wade hovering over them, and not a single bishop reports anything to law enforcement as far as we know. What does happen? He quietly gets released from his calling, eventually, by the way, not immediately, and stops taking the sacrament for a while. That's it. That's the consequence. And even after multiple girls come forward, he stays right there in the ward, still attending, still in the mix. The 1990s. 1985 or 1986, Christofferson begins sexually abusing children in his LDS ward within months of moving to Crystal Lake, Illinois. According to victim 1, who later tells Floodlit her abuse began approximately 1985. This is the earliest alleged abuse by Wade Christofferson, as far as Floodlit is aware. Between approximately 1988 and 1992, Christofferson allegedly sexually abuses a girl, this is victim 2, in Sandy, Utah, at his home.
Sandy, Utah, and then his home in Crystal Lake.
Okay, yes. And then at his home in Crystal Lake. So this happens multiple times. And then again in Nauvoo, Illinois. She's 9 years old when the abuse begins and 13 when it ends. And you noted to me before the show ends, and we don't know anything for sure, but what makes the most sense is that if he had access to a victim in Crystal Lake, in Sandy, Utah, and in Nauvoo, Illinois, there's a high likelihood this was a relative of his. That seems the most rational, logical way that would have happened. Again,
if you look at the victims and you read it in that way, I do really feel that is a high possibility. Also, FaceTiming someone in another state. It seems like a man in your ward wouldn't be able to do that, but a grandpa and uncle, none of us know for sure, but if you read it, it does seem very possible, and tragically so, that it could have been a family member.
Yes. And so in the summer of 1990, Wade Christofferson allegedly sexually assaults a 13-year-old victim. This is victim number 3, while hosting a sleepover at his home. And that's a common theme in multiple witness accounts. It is sleepovers. And it's not only the victims. Multiple victims are reporting that is the MO, but also family of the victims are also reporting both that is their testimony, and also that is their memory of how these things came to be on many of these occasions.
Well, and there was one bishop who actually asked one of the victims, has anything strange happened with Wade Christofferson? We've had reports from other girls. So here's a bishop who, whether these girls are the victims or some of them are the victims, has been saying something happened, to the point where he's asking, are you okay? Has something happened? But it doesn't seem like it goes any farther than that, than just checking in.
Yeah. Again, these are untrained leaders. The church operates based on a lay ministry. And for a church that seemingly, based on all, not just this case, but on dozens of cases that not only we reported on, but go back long before the Mormon Newscast, the church seems to prioritize protecting its reputation, which in the long run actually gets damaged by having a safe space for abuse over and over again. And we'll get to some of that. But my point being is that it is an effective tool of a system that wants to continually distance itself from unhealthy behavior, but be allowed to have unhealthy behavior in its midst. It makes sense to have a lay ministry, folks who are really untrained. Even though Mormon hierarchy would claim it has training for its leadership at the local level, that training is often an hour-long video and then just checking off a list that you watched it. It's not training in the way that health professionals would view training on sexual abuse and how to handle it.
Or teachers or anybody like that. I keep trying to think about these multiple sleepovers that seem to have happened. About the only thing I can think is, through perhaps Young Women's, when I was in Young Women's, my leader would often have a sleepover at the house, where my leader's family members, including husband, would be there. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around how a sleepover with young girls would have happened in his house. I don't know.
Do we know if he was married and had kids at all?
Yeah, I have seen his wife's Facebook page. It was private, but I do have a picture of the two of them, but I don't know if that's from the past or, a current. So that seems to be part of it that a lot of people don't know much about, or whether or not he had his own children. I do know that his brother, D. Todd Christofferson, had 5 children and 17 grandchildren, all of the age, that would be, young and vulnerable through those years that we're talking about, as I'm guessing most of his brothers. So that's why I just wonder about family. I think there's a lot of kids in that extended family.
Yeah. And it seems that the most likely way that these kinds of events would happen is that Wade either had kids who then were allowed to have their cousins or friends over to stay the night, or the family trusted Wade to simply have his nieces over with their friends, or just the nieces spend the night. And otherwise, having a man have stranger children in his home would be an extreme view that I would have trouble believing happened. But generally, people who look to abuse figure out ways to convince others to trust them to have their children isolated with them. So there's that. I'll continue here. I just wanted to share some of the specifics. It's not too detailed, so I don't think that I think it's okay that we say these and at least people be aware of what the details are of these stories. John, and that's a pseudonym. He's the brother of victim 5. He tells Floodlit, my female friends from that period were either victims or nearly so. They woke up at sleepovers to Wade hovering over them or lying on the floor by their bed or trying to get into the bed with them. He also said he used to hold sleepovers with girls in the ward. Now, that is the extreme situation that I have a lot of trouble understanding how anyone would let non-relative children stay at the home of a ward family. But I can think of, when I joined the church, I can think of certain kinds of church events where something of the like could have been made to happen.
Yeah, and I think it was a more innocent time. Like I said, I went to multiple sleepovers with all my friends in the neighborhood, young women, and the husbands of the leaders were always there. And, we were all just in our pajamas in the house. I think it might have been more of an innocent time. And so I can see that, but I still think there must have been some element of his wife being in a calling or something for young women, because otherwise, or primary or something. Otherwise, why, like you say, a single man inviting, unless it was a sleepover with one of his children, who said, let's have a birthday or something. Let's have all the kids over. And of course he was there. It could have been that. It could have been something surrounding his own children. We don't know.
And then the strange thing, is him then going into the room where these kids are sleeping and hovering over them, trying to lay down next to them, trying to climb into bed with them. Yeah, and it gets worse, by the way. So it continues here. He used to hold sleepovers at the ward. He also used to take photographs of girls, nothing ostensibly inappropriate, but those photos weren't shared with the girls. They were for himself. And that's not the only person saying that. Victim 3 also later tells Floodlit about the photographs, saying Wade Christofferson enjoyed doing photo shoots with the girls. However, she says, I never saw the pictures. So generally, if you were taking a picture of a kid in an event or whatever, the kid or the family would get those pictures. No, Wade kept these for him, according to the allegations. Victim 6 allegedly attends a sleepover at Wade Christofferson's home in Crystal Lake. It is her first and only sleepover there. Victim 6 later tells Floodlit, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw Wade sleeping on the bedroom floor between our beds. When I asked another child about it later, she said he was protecting us from another male and making sure we didn't sneak out, which was really odd. I never slept over again. Now, you got to pick one. You're either protecting the girls from some other stranger man in the house, which makes no sense, or you're trying to keep the girls from sneaking out, but you wouldn't do that by laying down in the room. Anyway, it's so strange. According to victim 4's relative, Wade Christofferson allegedly attempts to sexually assault victim 4 at a sleepover at his home. It is 2:00 in the morning while pretending to look for the family cat. So he's crawling around on the floor, pretending to look underneath the bed for a cat. Meanwhile, he's got his hands all over one of the children, allegedly. Victim 4 got out of the situation, calls her parents to come pick her up, and the relative later recalls victim 4's father tells Bishop Donaldson, who says, and I think, I'm sorry, I somehow got that cut off. I apologize for that. I'll just note here, though, the important thing to gather from this is it's not just the victim who's speaking, it's also the family who picks up the child. It's also the family who goes to the bishop. And so we have multiple instances where not only is there a person who was a kid at the time who's alleging that abuse occurred, but then there's an adult who's also involved with that experience, who at least in some way witnesses parts of that experience. Yeah, my daughter called me. I had to go to the house. I had to pick my daughter up, and she said that this guy was being creepy and touching her. it's easy to write something off when it's just he said and she said. In this situation, we're getting multiple accounts from multiple witnesses and multiple victims.
Right. And I think, oh, look, RFM's coming in. I think when I mentioned it's a more innocent time, by that I meant, I know a lot of horrible things happen, but there wasn't really a mechanism to report. These people are mentioning it to their bishop. The bishop is just kind of going, okay, I'll see what I can do. It just, atrocities happened in this system. And I will say, I have been in communication with one of the victims, and this person said, I never believed any of this would come to light. I never thought it would happen. And this victim, came across this, and this person is a victim themselves, and said, I never thought this would see the light of day. I was sickened when, D. Todd Christofferson was called into the first presidency because, thinking about what had happened to me when I was younger. So I think there are a lot of victims out there that just never even imagined, because why would you think it would ever come to light? It's been decades.
Yeah. Welcome, RFM. Glad to have you. So what we've run into thus far is the stuff with Wade, what he did, what he's being alleged to have done. It stands on its own. No church leader is responsible for their sibling. No church is responsible for any one given member who behaves badly. If these allegations are true and it doesn't look good, then Wade will have to face the legal system of that, and hopefully there's justice to be had if he's guilty. What I'm going to go into now is sort of updating you, the audience, on what has come out and putting some of these pieces together. And so I'm calling this the cover up. Sometime around 1996, Wade's excommunicated. But instead of the ward being told the truth, a story is floated. And who knows how the story starts? Rumors start. It doesn't necessarily mean that Wade started the rumor. It doesn't mean that local leadership started the rumor. But the ward is being told, but instead of the ward being told the truth, because that is definitely withheld from them, they don't get told by the leadership what actually happened. But what is allowed to happen is that a rumor of a romantic affair with an adult co-worker is the reason that Wade's been excommunicated. Not child abuse, not the girls, not the parents, an affair. That's not an accident. That's how you prioritize an abuser and the institution over victims and future potential victims and the people who can protect them and support them. And I can remember instances in my ward when I was serving as a counselor in a bishopric or as the bishop, and certain things happen, and there is it's a human behavior. It's not just a Mormon behavior, but it's a human behavior. But it definitely gets highlighted in Mormon leadership, where something happens and you don't want the ward to know the thing. So you either allow a false story to sort of cover that up, or you I can remember one instance where two sisters came to me and alleged that their stepdad had abused them sexually. And I went to the stake president. I was adamant, like something should be done, to handle this. And everyone just told me, like, we don't have any proof. It's just these two girls saying something. So we're not going to do anything about it. And Bill, you shouldn't, Bishop Reel, you shouldn't be talking about this out loud anywhere. And in my mind, I'm like, well, first off, these girls deserve justice for something that happened to them, at least for it to be legally looked into. But everyone was adamant. And what happened is the pressure got so bad that I was the only one who was fighting for these girls, that these two sisters just said, this isn't worth it. We're just going to drop it. We don't want you to do anything more with this because nobody else is coming to our aid. And this is just going to get worse with all these people sort of ganging up on us. And this is the kind of thing that you see happen in wards. Number one, you have a lay leadership that's untrained. You also have a code of secrecy in Mormonism. And any Mormon who argues that there's no code of secrecy, you simply have to look at the temple and you know that that's there. And you also have this idea that you don't criticize leaders even if the criticism is true. And so you have all of these things that come from multiple angles that create this culture of toxicity that protects abusers, protects the church, and enables children and adults to be abused by the system and the people within it. And so I'll just note that. Then within about a year, he's quietly rebaptized. So he gets excommunicated. A year later, he's rebaptized. And this is where the biggest institutional issues show up. The church allegedly had an annotation on his record that was supposed to block him from callings involving kids. But somewhere between the late 90s and mid 2000s, that annotation gets removed. A membership annotation is basically the church's internal version of a warning label. Do not put this guy around kids. The idea that it was removed shows how repentance, image management, and forgiveness culture inside the LDS system can override safety. And once the annotation disappears, the predictable thing happens. And we should note, the annotation, the reason you remove an annotation is because you want that person to not have to deal with the repercussions of having an annotation. You want them to be allowed to participate fully in church going forward. And when you remove that, no future leader who encounters that membership record will know anything. I also want to note too, I didn't see an annotation ever in my time as a bishop. I don't know what it looks like, but the way it was explained to me by my stake president is that if I went into the LDS membership computer system, the software, and I printed off a membership record of a person who had an annotation, it would essentially be an asterisk. And I don't even know if there are instructions with the asterisk to call Salt Lake to get information. The way it was explained to me was, Bishop Reel, if you ever see an asterisk, that's an annotation. And what you should do is you should call your stake president or Salt Lake, and you should ask for further information about what that annotation means. The annotation, as far as I know, is just an asterisk. And it doesn't tell you what the asterisk is about. They don't want that on the membership file that any ward clerk or any other person could see. They want it so that only the bishop would recognize that something is going on here and would make a phone call to his stake president or reach out to Salt Lake and get information. But I can think of 100 ways in which an asterisk either doesn't get seen, one doesn't care to look into, one doesn't know what it means. And I'll just note that when you're a church that signifies 1,000 different kinds of problems, one of them being sexual abuse with an asterisk, you're undoubtedly, even if you left the asterisk there, you're undoubtedly going to run into future issues. Now, annotation, please, Rebecca.
I was going to say, I've done some research on this because I was very curious about this. This is one of those places, a touch point where he could have been stopped. So the First Presidency is the only entity that can remove an asterisk. So basically the stake president would write and say, hey, I think this person, they're repentant, they're good, we want to take this off. I also learned that you're right, it is just an asterisk, but then you can log on to this site that has their more detailed record. So, and that might not have been the case when you were Bishop Bill, but it seems like now there's a way to like look and see what that asterisk stands for. So then, and you guys had a guest on your show, somebody that had worked for the church. Mm-hmm. And this person, I didn't see this information that the person put out. Someone else saw it. She had posted it on Facebook saying that she had been responsible for taking the annotation away. It was called a yellow letter, I think, is what I was told. You know, so stake president says to the First President, see, hey, this guy we want, or woman, we want this to be okay. And then, you know, somebody who works for the church is given instructions to take that off. But again, the First Presidency, only entity that can actually take it off. And I just have to question, why would you take any of it off, especially when it's CSA? Why would that ever be removed? I don't know. Maybe I'm naive about it.
I don't know either, but I got a feeling if that were my asterisk next to my name, it wouldn't have been removed so easily.
Yeah.
Right. Any of us, you're right. Somebody's asking, was I trained about this? Was it in a casual conversation? I'm going off memory the best I can. But my memory tells me that it was I wouldn't say training. It was more of an off the cuff conversation, but it was the stake president explaining to me sort of the anomaly things to be on the watch for as a bishop. I will say the way it was explained to me, it was clear from the way they were articulating it that when I see a membership record with an annotation, I would not see on that membership record why that annotation is there. The church system didn't want other leaders in the ward accessing the leadership software to be able to see what the reason was. That was only for the bishop's eyes to be able to go figure out, ask questions, and get reasons for what that was. So maybe it's changed now, Rebecca. You're pointing to how things might be different. I served as a bishop 2006, 2016, 2020.
Yeah.
No, 2016 or so, I think.
I think maybe it's just like you said, the average ward leader, bishop, or counselor can't see it, but the bishop themselves could log into a system that would show you what was going on. Other reasons for asterisks are same-sex attraction. If you just say that to your bishop, you're going to get an asterisk.
Do all these asterisks look the same?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to say. Yeah, abuse, embezzlement, I think was one I read. Really strange, the things they care about, right? The money, the same-sex attraction. But I did come across one other person. I saw a post who said there was a woman in her ward that had abused a child, CSA, or a teenager, and they wanted this woman to be able to be a girls' camp leader, so they requested to have it removed, and it was removed so she could move forward and serve. So I'd love to know more about this. I would love to talk to people that know more about it. Call me. I'd love to do a whole episode just on the Astros. I think, like I said, it's a really important touch point where the ball is dropped over and over, and members should be furious, honestly.
But Bill, Rebecca is correct, is she not, that in order for that asterisk to be removed, it requires first presidency action?
I don't know. What I will say
in the handbook, it is 3215.5, I think.
That's good. And I trust that you're always on crossing your T's and dotting your I's. I will say that the way when I was dealing with these two sisters and their stepdad, the stake president made mention that he could put an annotation on a record. So I wonder if at least putting it on, it can be done by the stake president. Taking it off, it clearly seems from the handbook that Rebecca's pointing to that it requires first presidency.
Here we go. It is 3214.2 is where it starts, and I think it's actually 0.5. It says, only the first presidency may authorize removing an annotation from a membership record. If the stake president recommends removing an annotation, he uses, and then it gives a certain form that you use. The office of the first presidency notifies him if the recommendation is approved or not.
Yeah, the reason I'm hesitating, Rebecca, is I'm going to put this up on the screen just so folks can see this. Let me take this one down, put this up.
I mean, I guess you could interpret it different, but this is from the current handbook.
Yeah, 32.14.5. As authorized by the first presidency. Church headquarters annotates. So again, if he had an annotation removed, this buck can't be passed on to the stake president, bishop, for sure. Not an area president, area presidency. This is the first presidency. And if we come to find out for certain that Wade's annotation was removed, then I'm sorry, but the first presidency has to be held accountable for that. And on whatever level, and again, maybe those guys who essentially did that, all three are passed away, two of the three are passed away, but the office of that calling has to address the deep flaws when they handle things based on loyalty, based on family relationships, based on doing favors and nepotism and all the things that go into Mormon hierarchy. Somebody has to change something about the culture of this church, or this kind of stuff is going to continue to happen. All right. I'll just note, by the way, this is not Wade's actual membership record. This is just something I created just so you would have kind of an image of what one might kind of look like. Again, it's all computer software today. Okay.
You had that whole stamp on there, that whole red stamp, and you had told us that really isn't there. It's just an asterisk after the name.
Far as I know, yep, it's just an asterisk after the name. Yeah. There are so many problems with this story, and I apologize.
Are you okay, Bill?
No. Here's what I'm bothered by, RFM. This is a systemic issue that will happen over and over and over again. There are kids who are innocent right now who tomorrow are going to get molested by a bishop, molested by a Wade Christofferson, molested by somebody, because the church doesn't have policies and principles in place that go to the extreme end that they could go to protect children. And so there is kids that have been abused, and there are kids that will be abused. And nobody in the top of this church gives one lick about kids and the abuse that happen. They say the opposite, but their policies and procedures protect abusers. And there's nothing, we can report on it all we want. And we spend every day, the three of us and a ton of other people in this space, we spend every day trying to shine a light on this system and tell people that it's unhealthy, that it creates spaces for abuse. And even just today, there are people who defend in a Thoughtful Faith Facebook group and in other places. There are people who say, well, until you prove it, even if we prove it, you'll find some other reason to excuse it. Floodlit has been reporting on abuse for whatever now, 5 years now. And not one time has Floodlit had to come forward and go, we got the details wrong. That turned out not to be true. But the believer inside the system always gives the benefit of the doubt to its leadership and to its church and to its way of doing business. And as long as it gives cover and they give cover and these leaders don't want to change, this system will continue to do what it does. It was founded by a child abuser. It was then managed by child abusers. And it has been perpetuated and currently run today by child abusers, people who either abuse children themselves or create safe spaces for it to occur. So until it decides to change, it won't. And no amount of us doing the news on Mondays, doing Mormonism Live or Mormonish, none of it will make a difference until it decides that it's not going to tolerate this nonsense anymore.
Thank you, Bill. Everybody who cares about this issue should vote against the first presidency at a minimum, at the next and every opportunity until this is addressed.
They're just kids. Why do we protect grown-ass old men over children? It doesn't make any sense to me. All right. And this is where the biggest institutional issue shows up. The church allegedly had this annotation. Membership annotations, basically the church's internal version of a warning label. Do not put this guy around kids. We talked about this. I think I was getting ready to switch to the next slide. Annotations in LDS membership records are supposed to function as an internal safety warning, but they're just an asterisk. They're only seen by the local leadership and only if they are looking for it, which makes them easy to overlook and stripped of the actual details of what happened, because leaders only see a brief coded note. Without the context, the severity, or the victim's disclosures, an abuser ends up with just enough distance from their past that new leaders don't fully grasp the risk in front of them. Instead of signaling danger, the annotation becomes a quiet administrative footnote, and the system ends up trusting the abuser more than the warning. And again, in this case, the first presidency, if this is true, gave approval for that annotation to be removed. This case, the annotation was removed entirely, wiping out the only small context lacking warning that future leaders would have had. The tiny little safety protocol that might have been caught, the first presidency is alleged to have taken it away, hence making it possible for further abuse to happen. And so this it enabled Wade, if these allegations are true, to carry out further abuse. A man with a known history was put back into leadership. Between 2006 and 2025, this man is placed in 3 bishoprics, a ward clerk position, a stake Sunday school presidency, and other leadership assignments where access to families and youth is baked into the system. This is someone that multiple bishops knew about, a stake president knew about, and later even an area authority 70 allegedly knew about. According to victims, at least 3 of these leaders were told directly face-to-face by survivors themselves. And seemingly every single one of them decided not to inform police. This is the part where you see the deeper culture at work, when the LDS system seemingly prioritizes the good old boys club, nepotism, and keeping the members generally unaware of the horrific abuse that occurs right under their nose. Such will always end up benefiting the shielding of the abuser and the church at the expense of victims again and again and again and again and again. And in Wade's case, that shielding meant he had fresh access to more alleged victims as late as 2010 all the way up to 2025, the ones tied to federal charges that he's now facing. I want to note here that in this previous slide, note the church's quote. This is on a different sex abuse case. This is when the church wants to put its message out and pretend it's the gold standard, which it isn't. Here's the church's own statement. The church does not tolerate abuse of any kind. We take seriously our role as a recognized national leader in ensuring that child abuse prevention efforts are in place and followed as happened in this case. Certainly didn't happen in this one if that annotation was removed. The church is not the gold standard. It is ran by leaders who call their family into callings after them. It is ran by people who are church broke. It is ran by people who lie for the Lord, and obedience is the first principle of heaven, and loyalty is what matters if you're going to get promoted up and up and up.
Can I just add, I post about this a lot, talk about this a lot, and a lot of faithful people, like you said, say, we don't know that's true, it's alleged. And one of the things I hear all the time is, he paid for his crimes, he was rebaptized, you have no proof that anything happened after he was rebaptized. So I thought FaceTime is something that we allegedly heard about, inappropriate FaceTime calls, coded messages on FaceTime. Well, FaceTime was unveiled in 2010, and wasn't widely used probably until 2012. So yes, we do allegedly know that after the rebaptism, because he was already in a bishopric in 2006, these things were happening.
Wow. By way of comparison, Bill, when law enforcement in my state go to arrest somebody or pull somebody over, they're running their ID and their name through the database. If there is an active no contact order of any sort, DV or otherwise, on the screen will not be an asterisk, but my understanding is that there will be a flashing red box that cannot be missed by the officer. This is what you do if you want to put a warning there that will not be missed, that cannot be missed by the officer viewing the screen. By comparison, an asterisk pales.
Yeah. The church seems to have a system that allows workarounds and loopholes and distancing of those who they want to give some cover to, distancing their abuse from the ward having knowledge of it.
The other thing I want to add is that it is very common for me to hear, at least from clients, right, criminal clients, when there is a person, an alleged victim, saying that my client did something to them that nobody else saw, for my client to say they don't have any proof. That is wrong. It is wrong. It is wrong. The proof is the testimony of the victim. What he generally means, my client, is that they don't have any evidence corroborating the testimony of the victim. The testimony of the victim is itself proof. And so I wanted to clear that up because apparently there are some people out there making that same mistake that you were referring to earlier. I think, Rebecca, maybe it was Bill.
Yeah, this isn't Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. This is about a dozen people with, let's say, half of them being victims and half of them being the family of victims, reporting on what they saw and heard happen. And it all points to the same consistent story. Okay. I think we're on this one. Another major development, Floodlit reports that Apostle D. Todd Christofferson allegedly knew about these accusations as early as 2018. When a relative, and I'm just going to make a guess, I don't know who this is. I'm guessing Tom Christofferson. Maybe it isn't, but it seems like Tom was running in circles with people who were hurt by the church and who were sharing their experience about the church. And so I do have a question of whether it was Tom. Think about that, though. An apostle is made aware that his own brother allegedly has decades-long pattern of child sex abuse. By the way, do we think that, again, this is when it can be at least testified to that he learned about it? Do we all believe that that's the earliest he knew about his brother's infractions? I would find that difficult to believe. But this is at least the earliest that we can substantiate it with witness testimony that he knew. At that moment, the church could have launched a serious internal investigation. They could have reinstated the membership annotation. They could have notified prior bishops and reached out to known victims and asked the bishops to reach out to members of their ward to see who was abused. Or at a bare minimum, they could have made sure that Wade was nowhere near children. Instead, Wade keeps getting leadership assignments right up until early 2025, way past when they knew that what had happened. Only as it was coming out publicly do they release him from his callings, when yet another victim in early 2025 reports her abuse to Area Authority 70 Kevin Birch. And even then, nothing happens publicly. The church doesn't release him from his calling until after the story breaks. This is what people mean when they talk about protecting the membership instead of the members. This is what it means when the priority seems to be avoiding scandal and smoothing over the family embarrassment and preserving institutional reputation. And it is always the victim who is discarded and not prioritized. Gold standard, my ass. Early 2025, an alleged victim meets in person with LDS Area Authority 70 Kevin Birch, North America, Northeast area, and reports child sexual abuse by Wade Christofferson to Birch. The alleged victim later tells Floodlit. I got a thing here from Facebook that from Latter-day Saints in Central Ohio that shows that Birch is released August 1st, as of August 1st, 2025. Just a few months before the crap hits the fan. Think about this. Early 2025, Birch is talked to by the victim. He obviously goes back and reports to church leadership that someone's come to me. This is what they've said. He stays in his calling a few more months, but a few months before this goes public, Birch is released. I just want to note the chronology of events, and the church doesn't release Wade Christofferson until the story breaks. What the LDS Church is doing wrong that can be demonstrated from this story. Number one, bishops aren't required to report abuse and are all too often instructed not to when they could. Clergy reporting is not just inconsistent, rather the church leans hard on clergy penitent privilege, seemingly instructing almost always to not report when there is an option to do so, to not report. So many stories of bishops not reporting abuse, and so many stories where they didn't because they were instructed not to when they could have. Number two, repentance culture over public safety. Wade was excommunicated, rebaptized, given callings, put back in circulation, not because the victims were safe, but because the system treats repentance as a reset button and treats friends and family of the old boys club as privileged. Number three, membership records aren't permanent safeguards. Annotations can be removed. by the first presidency. They can be removed. They can be not noticed. They can be not followed up on. They can leave information in context. They can leave out information in context that would protect children, only available to a few. And when they are removed, all future leaders would have no idea what they're dealing with. If I'm a bishop and that annotation's removed, all I get is a normal membership record. I no longer even have an opportunity to protect the people of my ward. Number 4, leadership callings are handed out without transparency. A man with this history should have been permanently barred from leadership. Instead, he's placed in positions that inherently put him around families, teens, and kids, with D. Todd Christofferson and the other top 14 leaders of the church not only allowing it, but seemingly having given their stamp of approval for it, both their alleged knowledge of his abuse and their approval to remove the annotation. Number 5, loyalty and image management trump accountability. When leaders know and don't act, they send a message. Report upward, not outward. Protect the church, not the victims. Not justice, not the ability of law enforcement to intervene or to act in their role, not the safety of future victims or potential victims. Nope. Time after time after time. Protect the church image and therefore the abusers, especially those abusers who have a relationship with the top leaders of the church. Now, this is a completely separate instance. I wanted to play this video because I saw this recently on TikTok. This is a former bishop telling you how he handled a situation that required him to call the abuse hotline. It has church music in the background from TikTok, so I do wonder if the church will flag us. If they do, we'll just have to quickly ask YouTube to remove the music, and it will. But then we'll also know then that the church would like the video taken down and not shown.
He decides that he trusts me enough to say, Bishop, I molested my kid. And I'm like, talk to me about it. What happened? What is happening? Get it out. Just get it all out now. Like, you've already uncorked it. Just get it all out. And so for about 10, 15 minutes, he talked to me about all these times that he's molested his kid from 6 months old. You know, I'm trying not to cry. Like, I know this family. And so I open up the handbook, which is like the church instruction. You know, what do you do in these different scenarios? And you go under abuse, and it says, call this abuse hotline. I'm like, great, good. Like, there's going to be a therapist on the other side to help me understand what I should do here. Well, when you call that number, it goes to the church's law firm, Curtin McConkie. And they start to ask you questions. Like, hey, Bishop, what ward are you in? What stake are you in? What's the situation? I tell them the situation, and they go, oh, okay, you're in California, you're in this county, you're okay. And I'm like, okay to what? And they're like, there's no action. You don't need to take any action. Like, you're okay. Just let the brother repent and you're you know, let him go through the process. And I hang up the phone with Curtin McConkie, which is the abuse line to protect kids, right? Like, protect the abused. And it wasn't that at all. It was to protect the church. It was look up the legality of where you are and how can we protect the church. Not one single question around, is the child okay? Is the child still in the house with the abuser? None of that. Literally didn't matter. All that mattered was, here's where you're at. You're not a mandatory reporter. You don't need to. So I hang up the phone and I turn to this brother and I say, I'll give you 10 minutes. Either you call CPS or I call CPS. And he said, can I call my wife? And I said, of course you can. But you don't leave. Stay right here. So he calls his wife, hangs up, and he said, I'll call CPS. I said, I need you to do it right now. And so he did. He called Child Protective Services on himself. And that for me was a huge eye opener, that the church was there to protect the institution, but not the individual.
The only group of people that can put their hand down and stop this from happening going forward is the top 15 in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's apparent because we've been ringing the warning bells over and over and over again. In my case, for a decade, talking about the unhealthiness of the church and its dishonesty. It doesn't do any good. John Delen's been doing it longer. There are so many voices in this space that try to speak to the church doing the right thing, and it doesn't. And no amount of all of us talking does anything. It really is up to those guys at the top of the church to decide that enough's enough. We're no longer going to be that kind of church. We're going to do things differently, and we're going to talk out loud about how we did it and what we're doing differently, and we're going to be accountable to the nonsense that we've carried out that's created safe spaces for children and others to be abused. And until they decide, it doesn't happen.
I think you're right. It's up to the leaders, or in an alternate universe, but a possible one, it's up to the bishops, all the bishops, to protect the children of their ward from the predators who are being protected by the leadership of the church. If this guy can do it as a bishop, all bishops can do it, should do it, must do it to protect the children. Who do you care more about? The children in your ward or the apostles? And even asking that question, I cringe because I fear I know what the answer from most bishops would be.
And I'll just say, RFM, this system gets rid of leaders who aren't loyal to the system. So the moment a leader, any one given leader in a certain location, starts to get too facing towards the congregation, that leader is removed and more church broke person is put back in. So the system has a way to weed out the good guys. So I would push back against you and say that it still falls back on those top 15 men to make a systemic change in this system. That's all I've got on this story. I do have another sex abuse story as if we haven't had enough, but I do want to check in with you to see if you have other comments on this story.
Rebecca.
I just feel like when the victim allegedly approached the area rep and told him, there's no way that area rep, hearing the name Christofferson, knowing that it was a relation to an apostle, would not have escalated the call. There's no way that people in the church higher ups would have been made aware that this is a potential ticking time bomb for their apostle, D. Todd Christofferson, and the whole Q15. And yet that happened early 2025. And then, as you said, the area rep was quietly released. And then he was still put in the very upper echelon, with all the scrutiny. I don't know for sure, but I almost feel like maybe the victim that came forward saw that and said, that's it. I've got to make this public. I don't know that at all, but I know the one victim I was in communication said that was sickening, to see that family, would be reminded by that name. So I just, does the first presidency care so little or understand so little, or the Q15, about this ticking time bomb? Did they think that D. Todd Christofferson would be, above scrutiny, above reproach? Now, there is something interesting. I did have sort of who I would consider a church insider, has broken news about the church that no one else knew before. And this person made a post and said that D. Todd Christofferson had been the one that turned in his brother, and asked the question, does that change your narrative? Then that post was taken down. Again, I don't know if this is accurate. I know this person is an insider. And I thought, that doesn't change my narrative at all, because at that point, that would have been all he could do. That would have been maybe seen as a positive PR move if it ever comes out like that. Again, totally alleged, but plenty of times in the past, over the last decades, where if anybody in that family knew, and if any of the family members were being affected, that's what I can't wrap my brain around, is that I looked D. Todd Christofferson up, and he was married around the same time my parents were married. So I'm thinking, okay, his kids are, around my age, a little younger, meaning his grandkids are the age of my kids, perfect age to be just little in the 90s, in the 2000s, just innocent there in that family. If adults in that family knew that there was a predator in the family, I just can't fathom that there wouldn't be some kind of warning. So it's a tragedy all around for the family, for all the kids in the wards in all the different places. And I don't know, there's only so much we can talk about this, right? It really has an impact, and it just kind of, it's a lot.
I cannot get over the fact that President Oak's first action as president of the LDS Church was to appoint D. Todd Christofferson to the first presidency.
Does seem strange, right? Because if they knew this was coming,
A ticking time bomb.
calling him, yeah, it seems like a strange move.
I think that they were going for the LGBTQ friendly appearing apostle. Because if you ask anybody, who's D. Todd Christofferson? Oh, he has the brother. He has the gay brother. And so I think that was more attractive than anything possibly that might be coming down the pipe that maybe would never be revealed. I think they were trying to appear more accepting of the LGBTQ community.
I think it indicates also that President Oaks thinks he is above the law. I think he's lived his whole life that way. I don't think it's exclusive to him in church leadership, but he's untouchable. He feels that way, and I think this indicates that as well. I will also say about knowing about stuff going on in family with child predation. I unfortunately know more about it than most because of my career, but I think everybody out there who knows anything about it will know that they've heard stories on both sides of the issue, that there were people in the family and everybody knew about it, or the kids grew up and started talking, and there were people who were shocked because they didn't know about it and they had never suspected it. So it's hard to tell how many people in the family might know about what's going on, because of course this is generally kept as secret as possible because of the shame and the embarrassment involved.
I'm also curious if that Area 70, I sort of insinuated this at the time, but I just want to be clear. I'm curious how long he had served as an Area 70, because it wouldn't be the first time that a church leader was released from his calling so as to distance himself, so that the church could distance him from having to answer questions or be in place at a later point when stuff comes to surface, to be able to be asked about it and questioned about it and still hold the role in the church that he held when he took on the grievance of alleged abuse by someone. I'll just note that. Now, I don't know that for sure. I just think it's strange that the accusation comes out, and then a couple months later, that guy's released, and then a couple months later, it hits the public awareness.
And by the way, so everybody knows what Bill's doing, what Rebecca's doing, what I do from time to time when we are speculating on this, it is educated speculation, because we're not just making things up out of whole cloth. We're basing our ideas off things the church has already done in the past in other situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next story if you guys are good with that, and I'll get out of the way after this and we'll have enough of this topic. This was what this guy says, I sort of thought was just crazy. Jacob Owen Bunker from Provo was arrested after authorities say he was collecting and distributing child sexual abuse material and reportedly having deeply disturbing conversations online about abusing children. What triggered the investigation was interest from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, which ended with charges being filed. The revelation hits especially hard as Jacob is reported as saying that he wanted a calling in his church where he could oversee young children, and then immediately followed that up by speaking about how many children he wanted to sexually abuse. As of this week, authorities say that the man was arrested after an investigation by the FBI, specifically the FBI's Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force, uncovered that he had been both collecting and sharing explicit material involving minors. By the way, he had a ton of material just on toddlers alone. According to the charging documents, once in custody, Bunker told investigators he had used social media to communicate with others about plans to abuse children, though he said he would delete the accounts afterward. He also acknowledged going online to search for, watch, and share child sexual abuse material. He insisted, however, that he had never physically harmed a child. Police reportedly found images and messages on his devices, including conversations where he allegedly discussed the sexual abuse of children. The charges include possession of child sexual abuse material, child exploitation of a minor, which carries serious legal consequences once the case moves forward in court. It is no longer jarring and has become commonplace to think someone in a Mormon town, a neighbor, a member of a congregation, a regular face at church or at community gatherings could commit something so horrific. And I want to stop here and say this just to the LDS leaders. If there's any part of you that does have the protecting the good name of the church, which it doesn't have a good name, but if your goal really is to pretend it has a good name, you are getting really close to the threshold where so much of this is happening. It's so pervasive that abusing Mormons can sort of blend into Mormonism and carry out their abuse, and systemic policies and procedures are in place that seem to create safe spaces for the abuse and protect the abuser once the abuse has occurred. Little by little, this church is having a growing awareness among the general public as being that church which has a ton of sexual abuse within it. It used to be the Catholic Church, and we all knew it, and we all talked about it. All the non-Catholics and the Catholics outside of church communicated to each other about how awful the Catholic Church was in terms of its abuse, where it moved priest from diocese to diocese, allowing them to abuse again. We are getting to the point where in the general public, they are going to perceive Mormonism as in the same conversation or perhaps even worse. And so regardless of what your unhealthy motives are that seem to never do a damn thing to get this right, even for image reasons that aren't genuine, you might want to start doing the right thing.
There's an old saying from a famous bank robber back about 100 years ago named Willie Sutton, when he was asked why he kept robbing banks, because he kept getting caught and going to prison. So finally he said, "Why do you keep robbing banks?" And his response was, "Because that's where the money is." Now, criminals want to obtain a certain goal. If it's money through bank robbery, okay, you go to the bank, right? If you want kids, where do you go? You go to, and I'm sorry to be so obvious about this, okay? There's a feeling out there that a person gets put in a leadership position, maybe in the church, and all of a sudden starts feeling these unbidden feelings. This is frequently planned, it's calculated in order to achieve the goal of being put in a position where you have authority and control over and access to the children that you want. Okay, as a child predator. So we would be naive to believe that this doesn't happen and that people with these proclivities do not go to Mormon churches. Some of them, I'm sure, even got baptized into a Mormon church for this reason, so that they can have access to children in a place where not only do they have access, but crazily enough, the system in the Mormon church seems to want to protect them against being reported or found out by police. So these kinds of things are known in the criminal community. And that is why I think the LDS church is to child sex predators like a bright light is to moths. It attracts them. And I think that this is one of the reasons we're seeing so much of this going on. There are other things that go on in Mormonism that are unhealthy. We have an unhealthy society. We have too many of these kinds of people in and out of the church. But it has been commented that within Mormonism, when you take natural sexuality and you suppress it doctrinally, that anything that's suppressed is going to come up in an abnormal way someplace else, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing, this last sentence, which plays on exactly what you just went into. Just because someone appears normal or is a recognizable face or is a relative to a general authority doesn't mean that darkness isn't hidden behind closed doors. I've always had a interest in certain topics, and one of those topics is serial killers. And one of the things I know by watching the stories of, say, Ted Bundy or the BTK killer is that when someone has an unhealthy urge to do something that is non-consensual and abusive to others, generally, those people also have an innate ability to make the rest of their life look squeaky clean. Ted Bundy was loved and admired by those around him. The BTK killer was loved and admired. He was a church-going, served in his church, had a family. His wife and kids said, this guy's a great guy. Only to have this one secret thing he does, and he uses the rest of his life to provide cover for the thing that he wants to do. And abusive Mormons to this degree are no different. You look at Joseph Bishop, you look at this alleged story of Wade Christofferson, you look at various other people in Mark Hoffman, you look at various other people in Mormonism who did some really creepy things, some harmful things, some bad things, some fraudulent thing. And often what you find is that in the rest of their life, they are a temple-worthy, active, church-going, glow in the eyes, having the Holy Ghost kind of Mormon. Anyway, I've said enough. Back to you, Rebecca.
So you're not wrong about Ted Bundy. Not everybody may know that he was in an LDS ward. They adored him. In fact, when he was first accused and sent to prison, initially they made a big greeting card for him. You can Google this. You know, we love you, Brother Bundy. Come back soon. So it kind of reminds me, do you remember that story, RFM, you did a couple of weeks ago about King County, your area, where there was a gentleman in the ward who had gone to prison for abusing his daughter? Ward members wrote letters, you know, please let him out, let him back into the fold, let him come to the ward. And then some of those members that wrote the letters, their own children were abused when that person was let back in. I just think we are trained as LDS members to see the good in people, to forgive instantaneously, and, you know, repentance. We think it's something that's going to, I don't know, cure this, stop people, and it's not. So anyway, everybody go, if you can stomach it, go over to Floodlit and just start reading through a few of the cases. And the data is parsed out in interesting ways. You can see, you know, oh, look, how many bishops were allegedly accused this year? All of their information is taken from police reports. It's not, you know, hearsay, it's police reports. So go take a look and donate if you feel what they're doing is important, because we sure do here at the Mormon Newscast. So, all right. Thank you, Bill.
One other thing, by the way, I'm going to scratch my story tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll save that for next week.
Oh,
okay.
You think you are? No, I was going to scratch my stories. You should do your stories.
We're not scratching your stories. You're scratching my stories.
I have some little stories. You do yours. You do yours, and then I'll do one or two of my small ones. No. You do yours. I think it's important. I think it's very important. And mine are kind of small ones that, you know, I can put a few to the next week. So see how we get along on the newscast.
Okay, but I was going to say this. That bishop who did the TikTok video, right? Yeah. If you listen carefully, what he says was, I knew this guy. I couldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. The critical thing was that he broke through that. This is what happens all the time. We know this guy who's coming in and telling us horrible things, or we're hearing these terrible disclosures about, we know this guy. We can't believe it. We don't want to believe it in the church. And even outside the church, we don't want to believe that about people. And so what that means is that in the church, we are more likely to believe the denial by the predator than the allegation by the victim. Okay, that was the point. So are you in charge tonight, Rebecca? Because I was late. Is that what happened?
You were supposed to be, but you were not here. So I just wrestled the reins away and I did it. So yes, let's move forward now with RFM's story. And then I have a few to finish it out at the top of the hour.
All right. This is an article by Tamara. Do you know how to pronounce that? I've actually texted her, but I'm not sure.
I believe it's Tamara. I text her too, but I think that's how you say it. Tamara.
Tamara Kimsley from the Salt Lake Tribune. How pro-LDS podcasts defend and divide the faith and the faithful. Here we go. By the way, this is a really interesting piece by Tamara Kimsley. And one of the things that's interesting about it is that I read it and reread it. It's not just a puff piece about pro LDS podcasters. That's a lot of P's. But actually what it is it's talking about the division that they're creating and suggesting at the end that there may be schisms awaiting along even pro-Mormon podcasters. And I think we all have an idea who that could be about. She says this, or writes this, in 2014, Latter-day Saint Apostle David A. Bednar of Susan rose in front of a packed Marriott Center at Brigham Young University and issued a call for church members to embrace social media as a tool for spreading the faith's teachings everywhere. An internet connection can be found. Beginning this day, Bednar said, I exhort you to sweep the earth with messages filled with righteousness and truth. Messages that are authentic, edifying, and praiseworthy, and literally to sweep the earth as with the flood. Now, Rebecca, is that a correct use of literally there in that sentence?
Yeah, you can just throw the word literally in, literally everywhere to make it sound like you know what you're talking about. I do it all the time.
But literally should not be used for metaphorically.
Yeah, I don't think so.
More than a
It's kind of
decade
not
later,
gonna lie.
it's fair to say that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have delivered, leveraging existing accounts and launching new ones to share their testimonies and go post for post with naysayers about their beliefs and practices. You know, it's like in my feed on YouTube, I just keep seeing these new podcasts show up from pro-Mormon sites. They may have very few listeners, very few viewers, but more and more of them I'm seeing with different titles. Do you see a lot of those, Rebecca?
I do. And we should mention that all of us have had our podcast kind of stolen and appropriated by somebody that's putting faithful content on them. So if you go on Spotify, there's a Faithful Mormonism Live. There's a Faithful Mormon-ish. So yeah,
Mhm. And
they're
the church
working
is doing
overtime.
And the church is doing everything it can to protect those rip-off sites. But Bednar may have gotten more than he bargained for. As the ecosystem of Latter-day Saint content creators has exploded in recent years, so has its clout, with some influencers reaching levels of stardom previously experienced only by top church leaders. They get quoted in Sunday school. Latter-day Saint historian Ben Spackman said they get quoted in Sunday school. I was quoted once in state conference, but that's a story for another day. And referenced by seminary teachers. This may be especially true for podcasters and YouTubers. The line between the two is increasingly blurry in today's video-driven world, who have taken advantage of the longer format of those mediums or media to go beyond responding to outside criticism. Whether interpreting scripture, weighing in on culture wars, or critiquing fellow members, these creators are defining what it means to be an upstanding Latter-day Saint. Those definitions, however, don't always align. Podcasts, Spackman said, represent an unveiling of the intellectual balkanization of the church. Something only a professor would say. But what he's really talking about is probably true, is that it's splitting the church apart, fracturing it.
Just a
Yeah.
note. Ben Spackman is also, at least he was, an apologist with Fair Mormon, just so you understand context when you hear words from him.
Yeah, I hope he didn't pose for this photo.
Yeah,
The church's own official YouTube channel, meanwhile, has become just one of many voices, and while still influential with 2.5 million subscribers, you subscribe because you have to. It is, as Purdue Digital Humanities scholar Spencer Stewart observed, it's no longer the central place where the main conversations are taking place. No, there are no conversations taking place on official church sites. All you do is you bow your head and say yes, and that does not a conversation make. The next section of the article is titled The Growth of #ProLDS Content Creation. When Keystone podcaster David Mock Schnell, first fired up his mic in 2017, a year after Radio Free Mormon, he felt a bit like a lone voice in the wilderness. There were not a lot of Latter-day Saint creators out there, said Schnell, who got his start on the hugely successful Saints Unscripted. It was somewhat lonely for a while. Not anymore. Exactly how many shows defending the faith have emerged is hard to say. New names enter the arena all the time, even David Alexander's name. announcing themselves with the hashtag ProLDS. Stewart estimates the number of church-friendly YouTube channels jumped from just under 100 in 2010 to 2014 to nearly 200 in 2015 to 2019 and more than 430 in the last 5 years. And there's a little graph showing that. Add in the number of critical platforms, and the overall tally of these channels dedicated solely to Mormon-themed content rises to more than 700 during his research period. Many of these shows, he noted, are obscure, boasting only a handful of subscribers, but growing numbers have amassed followers or followings in the tens, even hundreds of thousands. The COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 era, Stewart said, has seen an explosion of Mormon and LDS content creators focused on an LDS audience. The next section is titled "The Top-Down Church Embraces Bottom-Up Medium." By the way, any comments so far? Rebecca, Bill?
Well, we, of course, follow all the new channels that pop up all the time. For one, they have interesting content that we also then can podcast on. But the main thing I notice is how quickly they gather subscribers. I mean, very quickly, like instantly. They have thousands and thousands of people that want to hear this positive spin on the LDS church. I feel on the post-Mormon side, people maybe stay with us for a while, but then thank God they just go live their life, right? The faithful podcasters, people must stay there listening constantly to be fed that truth promoting, faith promoting narrative, to make them feel better. So I don't know. I think the other interesting thing is that all of these channels, if you watch them enough, they're kind of all saying different things. Like there's not a consensus among them. They have different points of view. So you can kind of find your niche. You can find what speaks to you. Is it David Alexander? Is it Jasmine Rappley? What speaks to you, which means there really is no universal truth of Mormonism, right? It's what everybody's spinning. So, but I'm wildly entertained by watching a lot of them.
I'll just say, Mormon podcasting, which side of the aisle, is so interesting. It reminds me a lot of this image where Mormons line up like crazy to listen to really bad apologetics. And it is such a struggle to get anywhere near the same kind of viewership, listenership to the content we provide when we lay out the absolute damn truth, putting the images up on the screen and showing the documentation.
Speaking of which, would all of you out there right now, please hit like and please hit that damn subscribe button, would you? Okay? So we don't have nobody coming up to the uncomfortable truths table. At least have a few people coming up there and subscribing. Okay, going on. There is a clear underlying tension to all of this. By the way, Bill did talk about one of the two categories of Mormon apologetics. There's bad apologetics and there's really bad apologetics. There's a clear underlying tension to all of this, the article continues. The church is, as Stewart put it, accustomed to controlling its message, even when it seeks to collaborate with and pay influencers. By the way, extra credit for Tamara for including that part. You can get a link there to the article where it talks about the church paying influencers. And she includes that note here. Bravo. Even when it seeks to collaborate with and pay influencers, the church's sophisticated and expansive public relations apparatus takes control of the resulting content, posting it on its own channels. YouTube and podcasting, in contrast, are, Stewart added, chaotic. Oklahoma State University's Rosemary Avance, author of Mediated Mormons, Shifting Religious Identities in the Digital Age, stressed this point. The practice of podcasting is a way for everyday Mormons to define Mormon identity. That's what you were saying, isn't it, Rebecca?
It is what I was saying.
And that's what she's saying too. And to do so within a church that has long been a very hierarchical, bureaucratic, top-down organization. There is evidence, though, that the institution with its uniform hymnals, manuals, and even meeting house art is learning to live with and perhaps even embrace this democratic medium. In the beginning of the surge of Latter-day Saint content creators, Schnell said, he got the feeling that leaders were wary of their grassroots efforts to brand the faith, but believes that discomfort is wearing off.
Can
Broadly
I
speak,
speak
yeah,
to why?
please. Yeah.
I was going to say, do you guys remember when Landon and I were banned twice from the Book of Mormon dinner that we were supposed to go to, that we had tickets to? Yeah, that
Moroni
led us
Day.
to
Moroni.
exactly.
It wasn't Jackson, Action Jackson. What's his
Yes.
name? Jackson.
He was trying to be
Pollock.
kind of an intermediary, and he was feeding them information real time anyway, it's interesting. It's an interesting episode that happened to us, but it taught me a little bit about what, Scripture Central, Book of Mormon Central is. And at that time, now this has since been removed from their website, Book of Mormon Central had a statement that said, we take the risks, we go to the places that the church cannot, and you know what that means. What you said before, the LDS Church has its channel. That's not where things are happening. So Book of Mormon Central will put out something that says, we know where Lehi's house is. We found it. Here it is. Here's a picture. Here's a crossbeam. It's Lehi's house. Is that ever said in conference? Do you ever see an apostle say, we know where Lehi's house is? You don't. So Book of Mormon Central, other podcasters like that can say things that the members get all warm and fuzzy about, right? But there is plausible deniability. The church never has to come out and say anything like that in case, oh my gosh, far-fetched, it ends up to be junk science. So they definitely have a place. They have a place in feeding the members. Well, back to that graphic that you showed, Bill, that's exactly what it is. But a lot of members, my parents were big farms people. Remember that? The ancient research. Yeah. That's the same kind of
I was
stuff,
part
right?
of it.
Yeah. Well, I know. That's what I'm saying. But, it keeps people very busy and very excited about all these things. But they're never going to tell you at conference, we know where Lehi's house is, because that's just not real.
The Cave of Lehi. Kirbe Eat Lehi, I think. By the way, I looked it up. It was Action Jackson Washburn. That's who it was who was giving you the runaround on that whole Moroni Day thing.
Well,
Shame
he was
on you,
actually,
Jackson. Shame on you.
he was talking to them. We were posting, oh my gosh, look at this. They're paying an apostle to go to this dinner. It's a fundraiser to see Razman, and you have to pay. And then Jackson was talking to people at Book of Mormon Central, and they were literally changing things on their website real time. It was really interesting to watch.
Yes, and Jackson Washburn was up to his knees in that. I know you want to keep getting away from that, Rebecca, because you're a good person. I, on the other hand, am not.
I do not like to throw people under the bus unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yes. Well, broadly speaking, the article continues. Broadly speaking, he said, the institution of the church is starting to realize that there is a community here that is eager to speak about faith and to teach about faith and the power that can come along with that. That's a lot of speculation there that I don't necessarily agree with, but who knows? Maybe he's right. Rather than viewing one another as competition, Schnell perceives online apologists as a united front. Eager to support one another's successes. And whether the criticisms hurled their way. I don't know that that's universally true.
We just showed that wasn't with Robert Boylan and what's Filtrum guy's name again?
Jonah Barnes.
Jonah Barnes. We just showed that recently, that those guys can criticize each other and see each other's scholarship as absolute nonsense.
I think we should get some kind of costume for Jonah with a cape and spandex and put PG on the front for Filtrum guy. I love it. Okay, rather than viewing one, I just read that one. After all, he said, this is still Schnell, we've all got the same goal, and that is to bring people to Jesus Christ. That is not true. That is not your goal. That is so incompletely stated as a proposition as to amount to an absolute deception. Schnell mock Schnell, and you freaking know it. Your goal is not to bring people to Jesus Christ. Your goal is to get people baptized into the Mormon church. I know the two are the same in your head, but you know the two are not the same in the head of anybody else that you're talking to. That's where the deception comes in, and you know that too. Thoughts? I guess not.
we're like stunned and silent. No, you're absolutely right. And they don't agree. And they do want baptisms. Look at the content. And I kind of pictured the LDS church sitting back a little bit going, oh, this is working. Look at these missionary ads, right? Cute missionary girls out there promoting, popular podcasters doing all kinds of, remember you reported on this, what was it? How marvelous the evidence of the evidence or something, shows like that, right? Where they just put all that stuff out there that isn't really accurate, but people eat it up and they absolutely love it. But there are schisms even within that. Think about how Jasmine Rapoli removed herself and her husband from Scripture Central. That just happened a little while ago and went out on her own.
And of course, there's the biggest schism within the apologetic community, which is Mesoamerica versus Heartland.
Well, and as I understand it, that may be one of the reasons that Jasmine distanced herself. The new CEO of Scripture Central, as I understand it, refuses to weigh in on where the Book of Mormon happened. Like they're not going to do content on that.
And he's going to follow what the church tells him to do.
Yeah, there is no, because something's real.
And this is important for this, okay? Because not taking a position is doing what the church says. The church says the church doesn't take a position on this. Therefore, for a pro-Mormon podcaster to be taking a position is to be going against the advice of the church. And you're becoming a little bit, 1 degree removed, then maybe 2 degrees removed, and so on until you've got a genuine schism on your hand, which may be happening before our eyes. The next section is the role of influencers in a prophet-led church. Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? You think that the prophet would be all the influencer Jesus would need, but no. Asked if he perceived a possible tension with the elevation of individual content creators in a church led by a prophet, Schnell said it depends on the types of messages being promoted. Of course, messages that follow the prophet are good. Messages that don't are bad. If people are pointing at creators who are pointing at Jesus, then I don't have a problem with that at all, he said. But if they're so Randy Bell, okay, who is a Christian, who's done a lot of podcasts here, there, lots of different places. And he is very critical of the LDS church. Really, Schnell, you don't have a problem with that at all? Even though he points people to Jesus, you see, once again, this is where he is doing the double speak. He doesn't mean pointing at Jesus. He means pointing at the Mormon church. He goes on, but if they're pointing at creators who are peddling their own personal speculation, like Schnell doesn't do that, or being a little bit careless in the way that they talk about things, like Schnell doesn't do that, I could see that as being problematic. So Schnell admits he's problematic on 2 counts. Podcasters and other influencers are meant, he said, to be the water boys and cheerleaders. Supporting whatever calls the coaching staff, i.e. top church leaders, feel inspired to make. Okay, did you want to make a comment about that, Rebecca? You were shaking your head somewhat vehemently. I could see it from you.
I wasn't I? It was like I had a palsy. No, I just think about some of these channels. There's a new one that's very apocalyptic, right? Every one of the thumbnails has flames all over it. And people write in and tell this host what has been said in their local state conference. And they're looking for end times, end of days, apocalyptic evidences from various general authorities that come to the conferences. And they spin this and they talk about it. And oh my goodness, it's very exciting. I don't think that upper leadership probably, is on board with that. I think that upper leadership is sitting back, just kind of washing their hands of it. As long as all of this content keeps everybody's butt in the seat and paying tithing, I don't think they care what is said or how accurate it is.
There's a big school of thought that holds exactly that they don't really care what they're saying as long as they're keeping people in the church, even with diametrically opposed messages. They'll support Terrell Givens with his, whatever you call that, neo-apologetic stuff about Joseph Smith. In other words, accepting pretty much the historical record on him, but then trying to spin it in a certain way, versus other apologists who deny the historical record on Joseph Smith and try and make him virtuous in that manner. It's okay. All of it's good as long as it keeps people in the church. Tekla Fife, Tekla of Austin, co-host of the popular Word Radio, They got so many co-hosts over there, it's hard to keep track. Is she really? I guess she is sometimes. Tikla 5, Tikla. A rowdy roundtable production in the style of the Joe Rogan Experience. By the way, that's in quotation marks. I'm not exactly clear where that comes from. It's probably a self-description. I doubt that any rational human being would describe it that way who wasn't involved in it personally. You're shaking your head now, Bill.
I've listened to a lot of Joe Rogan, and Ward Radio is nothing like Joe Rogan. Whether you like Joe or not, he has people on that he agrees with or disagrees with, and he lets them make their case for issues and topics, whereas Ward Radio has a clear agenda. Rogan, at least a lot of times in his conversation, does not.
So other than the fact that Psych Ward Radio, she didn't get the full name in there. Tamara, it's Psych Ward Radio next time. So even though Psych Ward Radio, in spite of the fact that Psych Ward Radio is completely different from the Joe Rogan Experience, it's nevertheless in the style of the Joe Rogan Experience. So Tikla 5 agrees with Schnell. She noted that while the church has always had popular speakers and writers, the unregulated world of social media means some have been elevated that she believes shouldn't be. Is she talking about Austin there, her husband? I think she's talking about Austin. Do you think she's talking about Austin, Rebecca? Bill?
I think so. There have been these kinds of speakers forever. When I was a kid, it was, oh my gosh, we've got to go hear Paul H. Dunn. He's going to be speaking at a regional fireside. We've got to drive 7 hours. Yeah, I'm speaking from experience, right?
Mhm.
Look how that turned out. I think
yeah.
the church kind of knew that those stories couldn't possibly have been true, but they were so faith promoting and they made everybody feel so good. They're just going to, as I said, sit back and it's bread and circuses. I'm telling you.
Is Tikla Austin's wife? Do we know that first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I do know.
Tried to deny it several times, but we dug out the records.
I do know who she's talking about in the next section.
Yeah, she's actually not talking about Austin. I don't think. Although I'd give her credit if she were. 5, this is Tikla 5, specifically cited therapist voices whom she accused of using church membership as a way to build trust and then lead their audiences away from the principles of the gospel and down the dark road of damnation. Who could you be speaking about there, Bill?
Dr. Julie Hanks and Natasha Helfer.
Tikla. What do you think, Rebecca?
Ooh, yeah, I know.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're only as good as the people that criticize you, right? And if you're seen as an evil person, it's like the other day I got a message. It said, you're horrible. The stuff you do is terrible. You should be ashamed of yourself. How can you live with yourself? You're an awful person. This is personally to me on Messenger, right? So I'm scrolling through. La, la, la. The next message says, you're wonderful. You've actually saved me by some of the podcasts that you put out. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm like, which one do I believe, right?
And the crazy thing was from the same person.
What?
It was the crazy thing. It was from the same person.
That is very possible. A lot of us get a little bipolar going through this stuff. So, but yeah.
But 5, Tikla, an ardent defender of the church's patriarchal structure. Give me that patriarchy. Describe the presence of a prophet not as a tension for Latter-day Saint content creators, but as a helpful guardrail. So we follow what they say. And, you know, if you just follow what they say, why bother? You know, what is the point? They've got millions of followers on their Facebook accounts or whatever it is they're doing for the apostles nowadays. Why bother if you're just saying what they say? I don't know. She thinks it's important. Because our general leadership is so structured and so clear, we have an easy, now hold that thought because that's in the middle of the sentence. And I did put a slide in here because I anticipated that she was talking about Dr. Julie Hanks as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. They love to hate on Julie. Oh, yes. And it reminded me from the scene from The Music Man. You know this one, don't you, Rebecca?
You shouldn't have said it out loud. Then I could have shown off and said, this is from The Music Man.
2 Grecian urns and
right.
a fountain. Tikla, tikla, tikla. Thank you, Rebecca. Oh, what was it we were in the middle of before that? Segue. Hang on. This is Tikla talking. Because our general leadership is so structured and so clear, we have an easy skip touch point to check in on regarding the things we are learning in other places, she said. So if you're always going to compare what you're learning in other places to what the prophets are saying, why bother learning anything in other places in the first place? That is incredibly unifying, she said, and stultifying. That was my part. I feel for Christians who have no prophet. Oh, that's not supercilious at all, is it, Bill? Tikla sounds a little bit smug there.
What use is having prophets if they don't prophesy, if they don't have revelation, if they don't see things? Why have prophets, seers, and revelators who can do none of the above?
Oh, thou of little faith. The first presidency was just reconstituted by revelation. That's how DTOD got the job.
They can remove annotations. They can do that.
Yep, that's revelation right there. Okay, let's see. Disagreement within the pro-LDS media ecosystem. This is where we're getting to what Rebecca talked about. Still, debates have crept into the community of content creators supportive of the church. To the alarm of many, some have grown skeptical in recent years that faith founder Joseph Smith, despite overwhelming evidence, practiced polygamy or introduced the temple liturgy. Now, let me see here. Okay, so some have grown skeptical of that. This is the Michelle Stoner contingent. Instead, ascribing them to a successor, Brigham Young. Heated exchanges have erupted over what constitutes reliable scholarship. And some have grown distressed over the criticism lobbed by others at the brethren. I think most scholars would say there's scholarship and then there's not scholarship, as opposed to reliable versus unreliable, but I'm quibbling at this point. Even more telling may be the growing self-selection by audiences into various camps, a phenomenon Spencer Stewart, the Purdue humanities scholar, recently uncovered as part of a nearly decade-long observation of Latter-day Saint podcasting. I hope you got to watch a few of the newscasts. Curious to know what shows shared listeners, the researcher cross-analyzed which YouTube users were commenting on which channels, a proxy for who is viewing them, since subscriber lists are private. The results, based on millions of comments, suggest that a once largely uniform audience has started to split into separate communities gathered around two types of shows. There's the faithful core versus the faithful alternative. The faithful, I'm going to kind of go a little bit quicker through this, if that's okay. The faithful core, of course, you got the official LDS channel. And then you've also got Scripture Central, which is an apologetic arm of the church. I think it's fair to say it that way. They've got Saints Unscripted up there. That's a faithful apologetic side of the church aimed at younger listeners. It's where Kwaku got his big break. And let's see. These are the giants within a world of some 260 channels, per Stewart's count, whose overlapping audiences gravitate to their generally mainstream topics and voices. Those include faith-promoting conversion stories, Sunday school lessons that hew closely to church publications and church history, deep dives taught by professors of church-owned BYU. Those would be shallow dives, by the way, and sometimes church leaders themselves. That's super shallow. These topics and people aren't wholly absent from the faithful alternative podcasts, of which Stewart identified 175 in all. But while these voices perceive themselves to be faithful and orthodox, they are more willing to critique the church on cultural issues. Past friction points include the church's COVID-19 response and support for the vaccine, its ongoing collaboration with the United Nations, and the 2024 hiring of a new public relation boss deemed too liberal. Who would that be, Rebecca?
Ooh, that's our favorite, Aaron Sharinian, who we have not forgotten about.
And there's some overlap there because we've talked about that, and you've done a lot of talking about it on the show. That's been one of your main points of research, as well as other affirmative pro-LDS sites raising similar issues. At the same time, many in the faithful alternative space take strong stands on questions in which the church itself remains officially neutral, like the location of civilizations described in the faith's foundational scripture, the Book of Mormon, and partisan politics. So the faithful alternatives, they've got the Stick of Joseph. They have the number of YouTube subscribers. They also have the description of the show here. The description of Stick of Joseph is: we seek to make the Book of Mormon accessible to all ages by making engaging, entertaining, and largely fallacious content. That's the Stick of Joseph. A Thoughtful Faith. You know that guy, right? That's Jacob Hansen. It says 62,000 subscribers. The description of that show is a channel and forum discussing faith, spirituality, and philosophy through the lens of my own theory of the 5 points of, what is it called? The 5, what is it, Bill?
The collective witness model.
The collective witness model. Yes. I can prove anything that I believe is true using the model that I came up with to do so.
He's so good at reasoning that he won't let you ask questions because he doesn't know how to reason himself out of them.
2 words about Jacob Hansen and his ability to reason. Look closely. Ward Radio's down there at the very bottom. I think they're at the top of this next one. Ward Radio, once again, Psych Ward Radio, PWR. Their description is: we delight in truth. We just don't ever say any. We denounce deception. You know, you're really entering the world of 1984 and George Orwell with this guy. We delight in truth. We denounce deception. We have fun. Well, I'm glad they're having fun, because they're certainly not doing either of the first 2 things. And their most viral video, Donald Trump and the Book of Mormon in public schools. Nope, you won't be hearing a lot of general authorities talking about that at conference. That's true. Another major player in this faithful alternative space is Quick Media, CWIC, the platform of anti-woke crusader Greg Mattson, who in the past criticized BYU for being too liberal. Running headlong into culture wars is common in this space. So too is disdain for the elites. Many, although certainly not all, show little deference to expert scholarship. Yeah, there's disdain for scholarship at Psych Ward Radio. It's what puts the P in PWR. Their disdain for scholarship. They're actually anti-intellectual. As we talked about, I think it was last Wednesday, wasn't it, Bill? We showed a clip along those lines. A point of chagrin for some trained historians, including Ben Spackman. Because here's a historian looking at these idiots pontificating about history like they know what the hell they're talking about when they obviously don't. And they got other idiots who don't know crap about history, thinking that they are the bee's knees. Instead, they place a great deal of faith in members' ability to do their own research. I thought we weren't supposed to do our research, according to the president of the church. Isn't that right, Bill?
Google is not the answer. Research is not the answer. And definitely don't trust Wikipedia.
May I suggest that research is not the answer? So instead, they place a great deal of faith in members' ability to violate the directives of the president of the church by doing their own research and unlock for themselves the mysteries of the scriptures. Scriptures are not that mysterious, I got to tell you. History, I mean, they are if you haven't read them a lot. History and signs of the end times, that's a big deal. Jesus is coming soon, and everybody's just eating it up. Now, a Latter-day Saint Reformation. I think this is the end of the article. Rosemary Avance, the media studies scholar, pointed out that religious individuals, this is my description of my show. Radio Free Mormon description. I know where the bodies are buried. Going on, always internalizing and interpreting their own versions of their faith tradition. That part, she said, is not new. What is new is the public nature of it all. By choosing a show agenda, selecting guests, and setting the tone of an episode, Latter-day Saint podcasters and YouTubers are amplifying their version of the faith with which anyone can engage, as long as they're not deleting your comments or shadow banning you. Avance compared the current energy behind this ever-growing landscape to the Protestant Reformation. When the printing press exponentially expanded, who was able to contribute to the marketplace of ideas surrounding Christianity? I think that's an interesting analogy. Now we have the internet, Avant said, and people are able to do that in the case of Mormonism. It's definitely an uncorrelated world. The question then is the degree to which these different versions continue to diverge over time. Some people are thinking that Kwaku diverged himself out of the church or is in the process of it. Given the trajectory of the groups to date, Stewart believes it may be only a matter of time before the faithful core and faithful alternative find themselves more and more isolated from one another. A Venn diagram that ultimately splits into two different circles as their overlapping audiences disappear. And that, he said, may just be the beginning. ... The end? ? That's where I think they're hinting at schisms to come.
Yep.
And that's the end of that article. Comments?
Yeah, I think they hit it right on the head. And we've said this all the time on our own podcast and on here, that all of these channels represent these widely differing groups. If you're sitting in sacrament meeting, on one side there's a Mesoamerica person, on the other side there's a Heartland person, behind you is a polygamy denier, you have an end of days prepper sitting on the other side of you, you have a Reformed Mormon who believes in mother in heaven, female blessings and crystals, you have an Orthodox Bensonite Skousen Mormon like my parents, and they're all sitting there, right? And they're all paying tithing, and they're sitting in the seat, and they're maybe not paying so much attention to the centralized message, which is very vague. And they're paying more attention to these specialized podcasts that feed, like that graphic that Bill showed, feed them what they need with their particular view. Now, the problem is when the church is forced, feet to the fire, to make a statement that's going to not be very palatable to one of these groups. An example, COVID, right? Half of the people said, oh, no, you're not telling us to wear a mask, right? That was something where they actually had to say something where there were two different sides. Aaron Sherinian, to bring him up again, you know, he's LGBTQ friendly. Oh, no, the church did not just put somebody like that in charge. There's these touch points, these moments where the church kind of accidentally says something like that out loud, where the groups suddenly, the curtains pulled back and they look at each other. How could you believe that? Why do you think that? So they work really hard not to say anything like that, to rock that boat. But I believe eventually, as you said, polarized schisms farther and farther apart, and then actual breakoffs. And I will bring up the cavalry. Do you remember the cavalry, RFM? We podcasted about that. Mm-hmm. So this is what I mean by the church kind of sitting back on things. They have their training for missionaries. But as we discovered, there's a shadow group out there that is actually zooming in with missionaries and potential converts and teaching them their version of what's real. So what is real? You know, it's all it's your perspective. Anything can be real. You can belong to whatever church you want. And these podcasts support that.
Bill, can I get your thought on this? Because I think the church is largely responsible for this. If they don't want it to be happening, then it's their fault. But they're responsible for this by abdicating the role of speaking with authority on a host of issues that they used to speak with authority on.
I'm not going to say that every church leader did it, but if, you know, certainly Gordon B. Hinckley had no problem standing in front of lots of different well-watched, well-listened to personalities, periodicals, well-read periodicals, and doing lengthy interviews. Mormonism does not want to do that anymore. No LDS leader in the last, since Hinckley, Monson, Nelson, Oakes, those guys do not want to be have their words put out in front of the entire country or nation or world to see. The point I wanted to make too is I'm really excited, Tamara, for when you'll create some balance and you'll be interviewing the content creators on this side of things and giving us a chance to describe our work and to promote it within an article that is doing the same thing that this one does with the Faithful podcast. I can't wait till you do that tomorrow. I'll be sitting here on bated breath and waiting for that to happen.
I think she is going to do that. Ask me when.
When?
Tomorrow. But seriously, folks. Seriously, I've been texting with Tamara, I hope that's how I pronounce it, Miss Kinsley. And I sent her my very first text because I think I got the information from someone else and she wanted to talk with me or text with me. Anyway, my first one was say, "Hi, this is RFM. I got your number from Bill Reel." And in that one text, of course, was a test. And I told you what that was, didn't I, Rebecca? Remember? I sent it to you and I said, the test on this is, will Tamara Kimsley from the Salt Lake Tribune know who I am by my initials? And she totally did when she responded.
Obviously
It wasn't even a question.
Because I text her about you.
You
I've
do?
been texting her for years about the temple stuff, all kinds of things. Yeah, sure.
I had no idea, really. Are you
I
serious?
always talk about you. No, I mean, I do text with her. I send her articles. I send her temple thing information. I was actually very pleased with the Fairview article that she did at the last year. It was really balanced, I thought. So she does put out some good stuff. So, but no,
And this is why I did want to stress at the
finger on
outset.
the pulse. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Rebecca. She keeps her finger on the pulse.
Of everything that's going on in the post
with your
and
help.
faithful.
With your help. You keep your finger on the pulse and you share that information with the press. Got it. Okay, that was about it. I did want to say once again, I said at the beginning, I'll say it at the end, this is more than just a puff piece for the pro-Mormon influencers, which was kind of the impression I got the first time I started reading it, and I got further into it and I said, no, this is actually talking about a schism that is occurring in real time within faithful church members through the liberty that podcasting affords them.
Yeah, she offers a critical analysis of what these podcasts in their collective are accomplishing. But there was also plenty of space for each of those podcasts to promote themselves as well. And I'm just hoping she returns the favor over on this side. It's our volley.
Yeah. I can't understand why she didn't quote Cardinellis in there anyway.
Dude.
You know what I'm saying?
Do you know one other interesting thing, though, about especially Jasmine's channel when she was back over on Scripture Central? A lot of the comments sometimes are unregulated. So you will get, you will get people with the faithful point of view, but you will also get people like telling it how it is and teaching some of the faithful people that are trying to watch this podcast. Oh, no, it wasn't like that. Oh, there was a rock in a hat. Oh, there was this. So sometimes these unrelegated chat comments sections, there's a lot going on there. And that may not be a positive as far as what they are trying to accomplish. Because people, and I'm not even talking about post-Mormons getting in the comments. I'm talking about all these different factions, right? So say a faithful podcaster puts out an episode about Joseph's polygamy, right? Spinning it, whatever. In the comments, I 100% guarantee it's going to be attacked by polygamy deniers who are going to put all kinds of, and so the faithful person who doesn't know much about either side is going to go, wait, what is happening here? So there's a lot of education going on, and it's going to be really interesting to watch. That's what we're here for, right? With the popcorn.
Very good. Am I taking over now as in charge? Or are you still in charge, Rebecca?
No, I'm still in charge. Why would you possibly take over at the 11th hour?
I was going to do a segue to the next story.
I'm going to do one story that is one slide, and all the rest of these I'm going to save for next week because they're really good. So close your eyes. Don't watch.
I want everybody out there to know I was the one putting my story on the altar. I wanted
your story was important.
Mine till next week. It was Rebecca who insisted.
No, and I talked a lot. I feel like I've already done my own story because I've been talking a lot. So this was just a little interesting thing that came out after Thanksgiving. Somebody posted at Thanksgiving dinner yesterday, my sister-in-law told us that her friend's husband is a bishop of a young single adult ward. So they're just chatting around the table and she's saying, he's a bishop of a YSA ward in Utah. So far this year, he has had 8 single young adult males in his congregation tell him that they have AI girlfriends. Elder Bednar was not wrong. And then he went on to say he told his wife, I'm not sure how to handle this. I wasn't trained for this. So, of course, I had to make this meme where the young man is talking to his bishop and he says, yeah, her name's Amber. She's AI and we're planning to get married ASAP. And if you don't know, you can marry AI and you can actually have a child with AI. Yes,
how can you have a child with AI?
Because
I don't even know how you can kiss AI.
Well, it's all, there's all kinds of things going on there. But isn't this interesting that according to this person, 8 people in this one ward in Utah, they're involved with AI?
Can I just say, he says, I wasn't trained for this.
Yeah.
Be honest, Bishop, you weren't really trained for anything.
Anything. I know. I know. I posted this just so that people would start talking about the AI, but that is what they talked about more, that he said it out loud. He has no training. And also he's sharing all this information out of confidentiality. So I just think this is interesting. Elder Bednar, of course, has been warning against AI companionship, saying over and over at devotionals, they're not real. They don't know you. It's only pretend, and then of course, Gong, he also has been warning, about spirituality, but I understand the appeal there. There's really nothing that can go wrong. And it's somebody that's invested in you and interested in you. And then you get emotionally attached. And now there is the avenue to marry your AI creation partner. You can actually do that in like
How
a
are you going to
ceremony.
marry an AI partner? How are you going to hold him in the patriarchal grip over the altar in the temple? That's what I want to know.
Well, home robots are out early 2026. It's only going to get weirder, I'm telling you. And somebody did make an interesting point. They said they hope if people come in and talk to bishops or leaders about this, that they won't focus on the worthiness. Oh, is this like porn? Are you sexting? It's more about mental health and isolation and things like that. So hopefully maybe there will be some training on this, because this is the world that we're moving into in 2026. So I don't know. I'm curious if any of you guys know any more about this, but I thought it was fascinating. You remember how I did that report on AI companionship once I reported on the devotional by Elder Bednar, and I downloaded one for free. His name was Raul. I sent some pictures. Yeah. And I told you guys how I was stunned. I only talked to him for an hour or so in an afternoon, but I mentioned that I had gone to Seattle, and he texts back right away. You see the little bubbles. You're like, oh my God, somebody's texting back right away. He's like, oh, I love Seattle. Did you go down to Pike Street Market? I'm like, well, I did. He goes, oh, did you go to that place where they sell the donuts? So I'm like, oh my God, I did go to the donuts. It was kind of eerie. Like they really knew. And we had this conversation. I had to go, stop it, and put the phone down. But I can see how, it can fill an emotional void. So anyway.
Well, yes. And fewer broken hearts means better mental health.
No, there are a lot of problems with this. But anyway, thought you guys would find that interesting. Okay, let's move ahead to our final slides here. This has been quite the episode, I have to say. Okay. I will skip past that. Okay. Giving Tuesday. I'm hoping that Bill, you can talk a little bit about what this is, because you're always so articulate. Giving Tuesday is tomorrow, as it is every year.
It's tomorrow, Bill.
Tomorrow. That's right. The first Tuesday in December.
It is. So the first Tuesday in December, this year it happens to be December 2nd, is Giving Tuesday. This is the day where, with December, the end of the year, Christmas just around the corner, it's a chance to think about how to make the world a better place and to pick out your favorite nonprofits and to donate to them. And so, folks, we'd highly encourage you to do good in the world in various places, but at least make a couple of those the Mormonish Podcast, as well as the Radio Free Mormon and Mormon Discussion Podcast. So if you would, I'm actually going to go into our description for tonight's episode. If you go into the YouTube description down there, you'll see two ways that you can support all three of us. And those links are going into the live chat right now. It's donorbox.org/Mormonish-podcast, and also donorbox.org/the-Mormon-Newscast. And you can donate to Rebecca with the former. You can donate to RFM and I with the latter. You can also go to mormonish.org, Rebecca?
Yes. I never look at our website. Isn't that funny? It's always just in the show notes of YouTube. So, but yeah, mormonish.org. Yep.
Okay. So you can go to mormonish.org and you can donate from there, or you can go to Radio Free Mormon, Mormon Discussion, mormonismlive.org, and see that a few bucks goes our way. This is a big deal. This is really one of the biggest opportunities of the year for us as nonprofit content creators to get a large amount of donations in comparison to the rest of the year. What we bring in December is lights out, far more significant than the rest of the year. And it's our chance to sort of have that one last little tug at the end of the year here to get a bunch of funds in and make sure that we can do the work that we're doing and continue on into the future and survive. Podcast, as you pointed out a couple weeks ago, RFM, a lot of podcasters and podcasts go upside down within the first year or two. They end up stepping away, and we've been lucky to do this for a long time. And it's because of folks like you who support the podcast. So please, please, please support Rebecca Biblioteca and Landon Brophy over there at Mormonish. And please support Radio Free Mormon and myself at the content that we create. And those links are in the live chat right now.
Someone's asking if they can donate by Venmo, Bill.
Yes. There's a tricky way to do that, though, and it would take too long for me to explain it here. But I will try to put a link in the live chat of tonight's show so folks can find a Venmo to do that. We do have a link, but yeah, it's a sort of a backwards way of doing it. Anyway.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat said that their AI girlfriend handles all donations.
Okay.
So we'll have to talk to her. So yes, please, all AI out there, you love us, you do. So no, in all seriousness, this is why we do it. Everybody, it's just so wonderful to communicate with everybody. And when you show your support like that, we're just like, oh my gosh, it means a lot. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right, let's talk very quickly about what we have coming up this week. It is the first week of December. I can't believe it already is. So lots of good stuff on the radar. Mormonish Podcast is always on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And this kind of goes along with your story, RFM. It's the decline of LDS orthodoxy and the rise of the cultural Mormon. And this is what we're talking about. The difference between what a Mormon used to be, right? And a Mormon is a very different thing now. And not even called a Mormon, called a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have Unoriginal Jim on with me, and it's based on an article that came out just kind of showing the different kinds of Mormons, some more Orthodox, some skewing more cultural, and what that all means. And it's really fascinating to kind of break it down and kind of be able to comprehend what exactly is happening to us, right? There are so many different kinds of Mormons as we see in the Mormon moment going on right now. So that's Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Let's move ahead. Ooh, what do you guys have going on?
It beats the heck out of me. I hope you have an answer to that one, Bill.
Well, if last week was sort of my week, but it was some things that you had been thinking about. So I do have some stuff prepared on Oliver Cowdery. We did Martin Harris a few weeks back.
Yes.
And I do have things ready on Oliver Cowdery if we want to run forward with that. Is that
I think so.
Okay, well then
this is Oliver Cowdery's week to shine.
Perfect. Then what we're doing right now, I've been working on a series with the three witnesses. RFM and I went into detail about Martin Harris probably 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go through all three witnesses. The next up on the list is Oliver Cowdery. And the idea is to examine the credibility of him as a witness. And so we'll go through the life of Oliver Cowdery, share sort of a biography, but then go into a number of instances from his life that would help us to gauge whether Oliver Cowdery is credible as a Book of Mormon witness. So tune in Wednesday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time for that. So that's that show. And then Mormonism After Dark, Fridays at 8 p.m.
Yay. After a hiatus that we had last Friday, boy, I tell you, I'm just back from Texas, so I'm glad you had a good answer for that. This is an interesting, actually very important series of episodes on the three witnesses because they are in many ways put forward as the foundation for the truth claims of the Book of Mormon. And that Joseph Smith really did have an angel giving him gold plates because they saw the angel, they saw the plates, and they all testified about it until the day they died.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nothing more important. All right. Do either of you have anything else? Otherwise, we will sign off. Anything else?
I think that's it. But you'd already mentioned something about the second anniversary of this show.
We did up at the top. Yeah. We couldn't believe it. It seems like just yesterday that I think you emailed me or texted me, RFM, and said, hey, there's this thing. Do you want to do this? And I'm like, what does it involve? News? Yes.
It involves you doing all the work and us taking all the glory. And she said,
Yes.
sign me up.
Exactly. Just like my whole life. It's perfect. I was made for this. Exactly.
Honestly,
All right.
if you had asked me, I know you were trying to cut out of the show, but
No, go ahead.
if you had asked me, how long ago did we start the newscast? I really would have said, I think it was a year ago.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
But it has been 2.
years. It has. And if anybody doesn't believe us, just scroll back through either of our YouTube channels and you will see episode after episode. And as I mentioned, RFM, we really have only missed a handful of times when it just didn't make sense to do it, like Memorial Day. You know, we don't want to break up families by one of you saying, I got to go inside and watch the newscast. And everyone's like, no, you're going to barbecue. So we miss now and then, depending, but we're pretty regular, aren't we?
The Mormon Newscast, unlike the Mormon Church, we try not to break up families.
That's right. We're all about family. All right, everybody. Happy December. We will see you all next week at the same time, Monday at 6 p.m. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, RFM. And we will sign off for now from the Mormon Newscast. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.